My name is Kayla. I am one of the peer consultants here at SARC, and I will be hosting this panel along with our other peer consultant, Akib, who is here. So I want to thank everybody for coming to our types of graduate degrees in psychology panel. I want to give a big thank you to our three panelists who are here from the Counseling Center. We have Frances Diaz, who has a PsyD in clinical psychology and is the director of the Counseling Center. We have Heather Schmidt, who is a clinical social worker with a master's in social work. And I see Lydia, thank you so much. You've just joined us, who is a doctoral intern in counseling psychology in the Counseling Center, who also has a master's degree. So yeah, thank you so much for the three of you for coming. We have questions prepared for you, but we also want the students to be interactive too. So we encourage you guys, as you have questions, please use the Q&A function on Zoom, and we will ask your questions to the panelists. So yeah, I think we should get started. I will pass it to Akib to ask the first question.
So hello, everyone. Thank you again for joining as Kayla introduced me. So my name is Akib Rahman. I'm a fourth year, graduating soon. Pronouns are he, him. I'm also a peer consultant here at SARC. So I'll be asking some of the pre-submitted questions that you submitted through the RSVP form and questions that we prepared for you guys. But you can also ask questions in the Q&A or the chat function. So I'll ask the first question for our panelists and also post it in the chat. So what graduate program did you attend? And how would you describe your graduate school experience?
I'll let one of my colleagues go first.
I can kick it off unless Lydia, you're eager to go. All right. So I did the Master's of Social Work program at Cal State University Long Beach. And it was a really great experience. I loved the program there. I will say it's definitely an intense program. It's pretty compacted. You learn a lot in the 2 years. I did the 2-year program. There is a 3-year option where you can stretch it out a little longer and do some of the years part-time. But it was a really good experience. I learned a lot and I felt like I received really good training to go into the field. So pass it to Lydia or Frances.
Yeah, I can go. Thank you, Heather. I did my master's degree in counseling and mental health services at the University of Pennsylvania. It was a 1-year degree with the option of doing 2 years if I wanted to be a licensed mental health counselor. And I'm currently doing my PhD in counseling psychology at the University of Maryland, finishing that degree up. And for me, graduate school has been really transformative these past 6 years. I've learned a lot about, I think, professionally about counseling psychology, research, teaching, clinical work, mentorship, but a lot also about social justice and advocacy, and about, I feel like throughout graduate school, I became more critically conscious. It really helped my life personally, I think, as well. And so overall, I think graduate school has, there has been challenges, of course, and at the same time, I think it's been just the power of education. Education has just really, and mentorship has really been pivotal throughout my life these past couple of years.
Thanks, Lydia. So I did my master's degree at Pepperdine University. I originally went in pursuit of an MFT. And in my last semester of the program, decided to switch to a general MA as opposed to the MFT, because I learned that the hours that I was going to accrue for the MFT would not translate over if I wanted to do a doctoral degree later on. And so I was like, wait, I have to do 3,000 hours now and then another 3,000 hours later. Like no. And so I went with just the general master's degree in psychology, and then started applying to different doctoral programs, applied to both PhD programs and PsyD programs, and ultimately went with Pepperdine University's PsyD program. So I have a doctoral degree in clinical psychology. I had a wonderful graduate school experience, very similar to Lydia. I think it really opened up my eyes to the range of possibilities that I could do in the places where I could work in having this particular degree. And it also taught me to have more critical consciousness. I was going through graduate school right when 9/11 first happened. And so that really changed a lot of the education and training that I was having. It did not come without challenges. And I think I was able to push the graduate program to make some changes and modifications to really involve more things around social justice, social advocacy, and multiculturalism, which are things that I value. But I was really, the relationships I formed in graduate school were really remarkable. And graduate school for me was, so undergrad, I did well enough to get into graduate school, but I was like, meh. And then when I got to graduate school, I was like, oh, I love what I'm studying. This is so good. Like, it really felt like a good fit. Like, I was finally getting to dive into topics and things that were really fascinating and interesting to me.
Thank you so much for answering those questions. The next question, I know you kind of touched on it in the first one, but the question is, why did you choose your particular degree? How did you know it was the best fit for you?
We can keep going in the same order.
Sure, I'll launch us off. So I went with the master's in social work because, well, I did my undergrad in sociology and I knew I wanted to go into social work, but I wasn't sure about doing an advanced degree at first. I didn't know if it was really worth the time and the money and everything going into it. So I worked in the field in a couple different nonprofit agencies in some bachelor's level positions first. And I found that my supervisors and the program directors were a lot of licensed clinicians that had either an MSW, an MFT, or a doctorate degree in some cases. And so I just looked up to them a lot, and I kind of picked their brains about what the difference was between the different programs and what I wanted to do. And for me, the emphasis on social justice and on working with underserved populations was really where my passion lied. So I wanted to work in those fields and with those populations specifically. So that's why I went with the MSW. I also felt like I liked that it was well-rounded and that it did have, you could choose a program emphasis in like program administration, program coordination, program development, as well as learning some of the clinical skills. So compared to like an MFT degree is going to be primarily focused on the counseling skills themselves and not some of those broader based skills, which is what I really wanted. So those are some of the factors that weighed in on my decision to choose the MSW.
Thank you, Heather. For me, I can talk about both. In terms of my master's degree, I did it right out of undergrad. In undergrad, I actually majored in psychology and film, and I wasn't sure exactly where I wanted to go. And I joined a social psychology research lab, which was wonderful. It was on studying race and racism. But I think I wanted a little bit something more applied. And I wasn't sure if I wanted to pursue a doctoral degree. I didn't have a lot of information at that point in time. So I did the master's to see if applied psychology and therapy and counseling was something that I was interested in. And because I've heard it was like a lot of focus on racism and its impact on mental health. And so I think that 1-year master's was also important for me to gain some more research experience. And that's really when I developed my research interests, and also see if this field, counseling, was a good fit. And I ended up really enjoying it. And so that's what led me to apply to PhD programs, because I found out I do actually really enjoy research, but I also enjoy the applied psychology aspect of it, as well as doing therapy and clinical work. And so I wanted a combination of both, being able to do both research and clinical work. And so that's what I got during my doctoral program.
Thanks, Lydia. So for me, I actually did my undergrad here at UC Irvine. So I'm in what was formerly known as Psych and Social Behavior, now Psychological Sciences. And I also had a double major in dance, which I dropped in the very last quarter of my senior year. And so I was like, dance, psychology, which one might I have a career in? So I rolled the dice and went with psychology. But when I went into the master's program, I really was focused primarily on wanting to be a clinician, but I wasn't entirely certain. And actually, I had never heard of a PsyD until my senior year of UCI. I had a professor who was a PsyD, who was a lecturer, and loved this professor. And I went up and I said, so is this like a real doctoral degree? Like, what is this? And she says, yes, it is. It's a real doctoral degree, but the emphasis is more on clinical and applied psychology as opposed to the research. And I said, that's probably a better fit for me because I don't particularly love research. I'm interested in reading it, but I don't necessarily want to conduct it and do all the statistics and the statistical analysis. It's not my strength. And so I felt like I was going to have to figure out, if I wanted to be a psychologist, how I was going to get around that. And so then I learned about this PsyD. And so I looked at various PsyD programs out there at the time. They're not all created equal. Some of them are very driven on just financial gain. And I ended up selecting a program for me that I felt would still allow some application of research as well as the clinical emphasis. And so I went to a PsyD program that still required a dissertation. So I did a dissertation, full research and proposal. It was more focused on program evaluation as opposed to, and I looked at juvenile crime rates and recidivism rates. And so that was something that I was really interested in. And so I found faculty members that had similar research interests, and that's what I was drawn to in my program. And so that felt like a good fit. I was also geographically bound. And so I did need to look at programs that were more local for, personal reasons. And so this was a good fit for me. I see there's some questions in the Q&A, so I don't know if you want us to respond to that or we'll have time to come back to those. It's up to you.
We can answer the questions at the end of the session. So I'll go and ask the next question. So what does your day-to-day looks like in your field?
All right, I'll go. So we like to say as social workers, there really is no typical day in the life of a social worker because by nature, you're dealing with a lot of crisis situations, people in with high levels of need or high levels of distress. So things vary from day to day, but I would say kind of like a typical week here at the counseling center. I do initial assessments and crisis care coverage, just the same as our doctoral level staff and our interns do as well. So I'm doing clinical services in that regard, but I'm not providing the individual ongoing therapy. So my time is spent doing case management linkage, which looks like having phone calls or meetings with students where we talk about what resources they need for their mental health. And I'm helping to educate them about what resources are out there, how to navigate their insurance to access those resources, and kind of providing a warm handoff to whatever referrals they might benefit from. So that could be things for housing, that could be things for academics, that could be mental health resources, substance abuse treatment, all kinds of things like that. So that's kind of what my day is, a mix of those type of things. Yeah.
Yeah, I can talk about both my day-to-day as a doctoral intern here and as a graduate student at Maryland. Here I am also doing intakes, initial assessments, crisis work, outreach presentations. I have ongoing individual clients as well as group. I run a group as well, group therapy here at the counseling center. And I also engage in a lot of supervision. And so I have different supervisors that I meet on a weekly or monthly basis as well as different trainings. So each week also looks very different and each day looks very different, just depending on what's going on. As a graduate student, it also looked very different. I did a lot of research. I was a graduate assistant, as well as 1 year I was an instructor for an undergraduate course. As a graduate assistant, I worked alongside the counseling center director at my previous university and did a lot of admin work. So that was how I paid for my university, my studies. And what else did I do? I did clinical work. So clinical work, research, and my GA-ship were my main responsibilities.
So hopefully you're getting the theme that our day-to-day doesn't look exactly the same, that there's variability from day to day. So in my role as the director, no day looks the same. I usually have many things planned and everything goes in a different direction because I need to respond to either some sort of campus emergency or some budget request or some other sort of high priority requests from administration that I need to respond to. I will say that as a clinician, so I started here at UC Irvine about 13 years ago, and I started in the role of a staff psychologist. And sort of as Lydia and Heather have already pointed out, the emphasis on those positions really are on a lot of the sort of direct clinical service. So providing that direct care to students, sitting with them, providing the therapy, outreach services. I love the variability of it. It gives you the opportunity to do lots of different things and taps into lots of different interests. And then subsequent to that, I became the training director. So the program that Lydia is a part of, I was that training director for 8 years. And part of my desire for being in that was to be able to help provide training spaces for our future psychologists and wanting to make sure that they were getting a comprehensive training experience. And then the reason I moved into the director role was because of my desire to protect and advocate for student mental health across the campus and across the system. So a lot of my job now is being in these places of advocacy and sort of really making sure that student voices and student needs are being addressed in the types of services that are being delivered. I didn't set out to be an administrator in that capacity. You know, I'm still a clinician at heart, and I still love sitting with a student and helping them overcome barriers. But I also feel like part of why I'm a director is so that that doesn't get lost and those students can still have access to these kinds of services. What I will say, because you're hearing one perspective of a psychologist role or degree, prior to working here at UC Irvine, I did my training at a children's mental health or a children's hospital of Orange County. And there's high demand, high urgency, lots of clinical services. So depending on the setting, your day can look very different in terms of what the emphasis of what you're doing on your day-to-day job. So I know that there's some questions related to that later that we can touch on.
Yeah, thank you. Very interesting to hear the variation in your day-to-day. I think that actually is a good segue to our next question, which kind of touches on what you already said, which is what made you want to work in a higher education setting as compared to any other work setting?
So for me, it was really about the population and the phase of life that students are in. I've worked a lot with a little bit on the younger side of adolescents throughout my career, but always with like adolescents, young adults. And I just really have a passion for this phase of life, because I feel like it's such a transformative time, and you're kind of you hit these forks in the road where your life can go really different ways than you initially thought it could or would. And so I love being able to be there for students at that stage of life. And also feel like, just practically speaking, to be real, the higher education setting for me gave me a lot more security and stability than some of the nonprofit positions that I was working in before. Those positions sometimes are grant funded, which we are funded by some, various sources, but in a different way than, the state and federal funding, which can change from year to year or sometimes month to month. And, not that they're not good positions. I did it for 10 years, so I had a great experience, learned a lot, but at this point in my career, was just looking for something with a little bit more stability.
Thank you, Heather. And I want to echo that as well. I think there's two main reasons. First, I love the college student population. I think it's a very exciting time period of life and also challenging. Oftentimes it's like the first time away from home, and just emerging adulthood, I feel like, can come with a lot of difficulties. So I think that's one of the reasons, as well as just my own experiences in higher education, I think has been, again, very transformative. And so wanting to give back. And I also am actually an international student. And so there are challenges and barriers to what kind of settings I can work at. And so higher education grants me some access that I would be more difficult in other settings. And so, I can go into that later if there's more questions about that, but it is helpful, I think, being in higher education as an international student.
So in my graduate program, because I wasn't really sure where I ultimately wanted to land, my graduate program had me do what's called a practicum placement. So a field study would be sort of like the equivalent in multiple different settings. And so I had the opportunity to do some clinical work in the VA setting, in an elementary school, a community mental health center, and then ultimately did my internship and postdoc in a children's hospital. And when I was working at the community mental health center, I also had to do a rotation through college. So it was actually a junior community college setting. And so what it did is it exposed me to lots of different types of work and lots of different types of setting, because I wasn't exactly sure. I just knew I wanted to work with people and help them and support them through whatever adversity they were facing. And through that, I ultimately found that I really did love this particular group, this age developmental time. I also thought about the barriers and the hardships that I faced as an undergraduate student. And I mean, I never walked into the counseling center, didn't even know it existed. And so I thought, gosh, if I did, how much more successful could I have been? And kind of sad to know, but I now run the center that I didn't even know existed. But that was really helpful for me to be able to have the exposure to those different settings. In the children's hospital, I was working primarily with Spanish-speaking families and doing a lot of assessment and testing. And this is the age here at the university that I really love. It really just is something that I think is just such a really critical time in someone's life. The other thing is that over the years, I've been recruited and had opportunities to go into private sectors or nonprofits. And one of the things is there's some really nice benefits of working for a public institution. And one of those, as I was just sharing with some of them, is, to be able to apply eventually for the public loan forgiveness program. School loans are expensive and hard and can feel like they're never going to go away. And there is hope that those could happen. And so that's one of the perks of being able to work in higher education, amongst the things that Lydia and Heather have already mentioned.
Thank you so much for answering the question. So I'll ask the next one. So what skills, abilities, and personal attributes you think students looking to pursue your program should have?
It's a big one. There's a lot of different things that I think you'll need while working in this field. And I think that a couple of the top ones that come to mind is really just the ability to connect with people. I think the ability to be empathic and try to put yourself in someone else's shoes and really come from a place of non-judgment and compassion for others. Those attributes are so core to what we do. I feel like you can't really succeed in this role if you don't have that at the core. And then I think also just being able to manage stress and manage deadlines, manage things when they're maybe to be able to stay calm in a crisis situation and be kind of a calming force for someone else. So being able to field multiple demands and kind of prioritize as you need to and tend to what's important, which I feel like as a student, you're constantly working on managing your stress and fielding multiple demands from your program and your professors and all the classes take. So I think if you look at that as training itself, for the workforce, I think you can really hone in on those skills too in your program.
Yeah, I think to add on to that, I think one of the skills or characteristics is curiosity, and curiosity about whether it's clinical work or research or mentorship, just going in with, non-judgment, but more of a lens of being curious, as well as, I think empathy and also kind of knowing your own boundaries and knowing yourself and what you are okay with, what you're not okay with. I think those are the two I can think of, as well as how we take care of ourselves. I think that's such an important thing that's been emphasized throughout graduate school because it is hard, it's not easy. And so how do we unwind? How do we cope with difficult life things? And asking for help as well. I think that's a really important life lesson that I've learned over the past years is the importance of asking for help. I remember before I started my PhD program, someone told me like, my biggest advice is find a therapist before you start. And I think that was really helpful to get support because we all need it.
Just to sort of echo what both Heather and Lydia have said, I do think it's really important to sort of know who you are and what your limitations are. I think people who tend to move into this field, they're moving into this field because they are caring and want to be helpful and want to support other people. And it's important to know that unlike other professions, you are essentially the tool, right? Like we don't pull out a scalpel or whatever. We're the containers, or we sort of sit with people who are going through really difficult spaces. And so there needs to be an outlet for your own stuff and for you to be able to sort of not carry the work with you all the time. I think in addition to what the two of them shared, this is such a great question. I've been trying to figure out like, most of the things like we can teach you the skills of how to listen and all of those things. But I can't necessarily teach someone to be curious, as Lydia pointed out. But the thing that I would sort of say is integrity and ethics are really critical. I can teach you what the ethical guidelines are, but I can't teach you to be an ethical person, right? Like that really is something that is really important in our profession because people are putting their trust in us in very vulnerable times in their life. And so they need to know that we're not going to violate that trust, that we really can be a space of them being able to come and just be completely vulnerable in whatever's going on. And they need to know that we're not going to violate that. And so in order for that to be true, they need to know that we practice with integrity and sort of our ethical guidelines that that really drives and governs all that we do.
Thank you. Yeah, that was a very insightful answer. Thank you. So this kind of relates to the question that you just answered, but the next question is, would you recommend any on-campus or off-campus opportunities to help students build up these skills?
Yes, I think definitely for me, my like extracurricular or volunteer work that I was involved in throughout undergrad and even high school really helped shape and guide some of the places that I ended up working or wanting to work. So I think as much as you can get practical experience, sometimes those will come through the school as well, like field placement or like internship requirements that you have as part of your program. I've always just advised people to really take those seriously and really do your research ahead of time into where you want to be placed and seek out a place that works with the population that you're interested in working with later on, so that you can learn a lot while you're there, because I think those hands-on experiences really shape a lot, like as far as your own skills and your abilities and just where you land in the field. And there are a lot of positions available in the field at the bachelor's level for like being a behavioral aid or working in a group home. Those are some of the things like I did early on, or I've worked alongside bachelor's level staff that are in those positions. That can give you tons of great hands-on experience.
Thank you, Heather. I don't have like specific recommendations about on campus or off campus. I would just say try things out because you never know. Like I did an internship in a completely different field and like a news broadcasting company. Ended up not liking it, and that was okay because I learned that this lifestyle was not just didn't fit well with me. Even during my program, I tried a number of different practicums, worked at college counseling centers, at a community mental health clinic, and figuring out, okay, what do I enjoy? What do I, maybe not enjoy as much? And so I'll just say try things out. Find opportunities when you can, and even if it's not a good fit, it's an opportunity to learn something about, I think, yourself as well.
Thank you, Lydia. I would say off campus, definitely look at some of the programs that Heather mentions. There's so many that you can do at a bachelor's level that will give you some exposure and give you some information about whether or not that's a place that you want to pursue. I also want to speak to those of you who don't do that. It's okay. If you just know you want to pursue this, but not exactly sure where you want to go into a graduate program that will give you opportunity and exposure to lots of different things. On campus, there's lots of sort of peer-to-peer support programs that you could apply to be part of. The Counseling Center has 3, which I think are great, and applications usually come out about now. Hopefully they didn't close already. I've been out for a week. So Lydia, I'm looking at you, Lydia. I was like, we might have missed the deadline. I'm not sure if we did, but if we did, explore that for next year. They usually come out in the spring, but we have our coach program, which is one-to-one coaching. We have a peer educator program, which does a lot of psychoeducational workshops out there. And then we have our LGBT mentoring program. And so those are all great opportunities for you to be involved in, to get some additional experience and exposure and help you decide whether this is something you want to pursue. The last thing I'll share about this is even if you end up in a degree and licensed and you end up in a job and you're like, oh, this is not the fit, that's okay. Part of why having these degrees is they do allow for mobility. and they'll give the opportunity to move to other places. I took a position working with former foster care. Well, they weren't former. I working with foster care youth. I thought I was going to love it because I love children and working with children. And it was not a good fit. And I thought I was going to completely destroy my career, wanting to leave a job I had accepted and only been there for less than 6 months. There was the skills and the things that I had allowed me to move into other settings. And so it's not the end of the world if you find yourself in a position that's not a good match. There are opportunities to be able to move to other things because of the skills and the training that you will get through the various graduate programs that you attend.
Thank you everyone for answering. I'll ask the last question before we go up to the Q&A from the attendees. So what advice would you give to the students who's looking to go down a similar path?
I think I would kind of just echo some of the themes that we've already touched on today, which is like, be open. I think our field is really this combination of, there's the professional piece, but it involves a lot of your, like, it will touch you personally in a lot of ways, and it affects you personally in a lot of ways. So as much as you're able to kind of, some of the things Lydia was speaking to, like seek out your own personal healing and growth along the journey, I think is going to make you even stronger in your positions that you are working in. I'm biased, but I would say go for the MSW because it's such a great program. I had a wonderful, phenomenal experience. And if your passion is really, I know a lot of psychology programs are incorporating a lot more multiculturalism and social justice aspects now, or have over time. But if that's your focus, to pick your program based on what you really want to study and what you want to focus on for your research, for your courses. Like I always tell people, like, go, when you're looking into programs, look at their actual course listing and some of their syllabuses and see what what you'll actually be studying, how you'll be spending your time, how much of your time is going to be at an internship, what kind of internships do they link you to, and kind of try to be thoughtful about how you select your program in that way.
Thank you, Heather. Yeah, I would just reiterate what I said before, is seeking help, seeking support, like know who you can lean on in times of, in challenging times, because that's going to be important, just I think throughout life, is getting support. And I would also say just talk to people. Like I think people are very open to sharing their experiences, or can be. And everyone has unique experiences. So there's so many different factors, I think, to consider in choosing a graduate degree and choosing your career. There's so many different factors. And so I would just say, talk to as many people as you can to gain data and information about what might be a good fit for you, what kind of place you want to work at, what kind of setting, population, where, etc. Yeah.
Thank you both. I think a graduate degree, whether it's at a master's or a doctoral degree, it's an investment. And it's not just an investment financially, it's an investment in sort of you and your time and your family. Everyone sort of gets committed to this experience that you have signed up for. And so you want to make sure that it's a good fit for where you are, whether that's geographic location, the type of program that you're studying. As Heather said, look at what the courses are. As Lydia is also alluded to, like who's on the faculty, what are the mentors that are accessible to you? If aspects of identity matter and having sort of representation matters, look for people that are, represented in their faculty that you will be able to have access to. That's going to be really critical. That was something I struggled with as a Latina or Latinx Spanish speaking individual, not having a whole lot of supervisors in different placements that I was in who spoke Spanish, who couldn't really provide me with a lot of support, as I was providing primarily mental health services in Spanish, right? It's like, wait a minute, I don't know, I'm trained for this. And so, a lot has changed over time, but really looking to like, what interests you? What are you passionate about? So even if you don't know what population or where you want to specifically end up working, look for the subjects and the material that really speak to you, that spark your interest, and go for programs that match that. Also know, and I know this is probably an unpopular statement, but if you end up in a graduate program that is not a good fit, you can change your program. I know we often think like, no, I'm in, I got to commit, I'm all the way in. But I have known in my profession, I've known several of dear colleagues that I have the utmost respect for that ended up after a year in their graduate program, switching to a different program that had a better fit for research or where their faculty member was. And so know that that's possible. The other thing that I would say is, because if you do pursue a doctoral degree, whether it's the PhD or a PsyD, it's a long process. And inevitably, there will be a point where you think, what have I done? I am too far from the finish line, but I've also committed too much time to quit. So there's a moment of feeling completely like, what is going on here? And I will say that it is worth it to keep going. There is, I'm looking at Lydia, you're right there. There is a finish line. It is absolutely worth it. But in those moments of that sort of questioning, that's when you want to be able to access the mentors, the colleagues, the faculty people who can sort of help support you through those challenging points.
Yes, thank you so much for that advice. That is all the questions that we prepared. So we're going to move into the questions submitted by the attendees. So if anyone has any questions, please use the Q&A function and we will ask them. So I will ask the first question that someone submitted. It said, could you please tell us about your research and internship experience before graduate school? How many experience? How long was each experience?
So I only did one formal internship during my undergraduate years. It was a full, 2-semester internship at a school. I was doing an internship in school counseling at a middle school. And, but I did a lot of volunteering at with different organizations, community service type organizations throughout my undergrad years as well. So I feel like that kind of also helps kind of as an adjunct to the formal internship. As far as research, it was just the research methods class that I took, statistics courses that I had to take as part of my major that I was a part of. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think in terms of my undergraduate degree, I joined 2 research labs. I did one that was on mathematics, learning mathematics. And so working with children and helping the professor run data collection. And that I did for 3 years, which was kind of my first step into research. But then I think I wanted something a little more, again, kind of that aligned with more of my research interests on race and racism. And so I joined another research lab for 2 years that focused on how to decrease bias and racism in the US. And then during my master's degree, I also joined another research lab for a year and then got a little bit of experience with writing a book chapter. I just went up to a professor and asked him if he was open to, if he had any ideas about publishing or anything I could get involved in. And so, yeah, I would just suggest like reaching out to faculty and professors if research is what you're interested in.
So as an undergrad, I did a field placement at Girls Inc. While here at UCI, and it was great. I was able to work with female youth, and got to be at an elementary school and sort of facilitate groups and things like that. It was really fascinating and an interesting experience. So I did that, I think, my last year as an undergrad. I wasn't superly involved in research. Again, research was not my thing. So outside of what was required for courses and graduation, I didn't really get involved in a research lab. Dr. C. Castellanos would be upset at hearing me say that. So, but just know that research is important, and so you should follow and pursue research. But it wasn't my passion and interest area, and so I didn't do a whole lot of that. And it worked out for me in part because I, again, when I thought I was going to get an MFT, I was like, I don't really need all of that. And then, of course, I switched. But I think that there are wonderful opportunities here at UC Irvine. If you are interested in research, that we have some phenomenal professors doing some really great work. And so there are opportunities to be involved in research if you're interested.
Thank you so much for answering the question. I'll ask the next one. So a student asked, if I'm interested in applying for grad school in psychology, but I do not have a specific goal yet, I wonder what are some of the possible fields of master's or doctoral programs, and what are some possible career paths after graduating?
So I feel like these with the master's in social work, it's a really versatile degree. So the type of fields you could work in vary a lot. I mean, from working in correctional facilities to hospitals to with the VA, the Veterans Association, schools, outpatient mental health, inpatient mental health, substance abuse treatment. There's just a large variety of types of career paths you can take. And so kind of like, I guess, just to echo as part of this question, like, it's okay if you don't know. And you probably, I will say, even if you think you know where you're going to land up, you probably aren't right, because your career path will take you on this journey that you sometimes, like, I didn't even know social workers on a college campus was a thing. I had no idea that this job that I'm in now even existed when I was applying to graduate school and going through graduate school. Even for years after, I had no idea these positions existed. So things will open up for you. I just want to encourage you in that. Focus on what your passions are and what you enjoy studying. And I think then the career path will fall in place.
Yeah, I think in terms of doctoral programs, I think it's also very versatile. Like I'll be starting as a tenure track assistant professor in the fall. So if you get a doctorate, you can teach at the university level if that's something you're interested in. There's universities that are more focused on research and universities that are more focused on teaching. So there's that. You could work at a college counseling center, private practice, VAs, academic medical centers, community mental health sites, So if you're interested in more the clinical side, but there's also other kind of careers. So I know that a lot of people right now are also interested in looking outside of either clinical work or academia. And so looking into industry and UX researcher positions are becoming big in tech. I know other people go into creating their own business and becoming business folks. And so I think there's a lot of different pathways that you could take with the degree.
So the wonderful thing about a degree in psychology is it allows for lots of flexibility. So I know people who end up in HR, I know people who end up in private sectors. They're consultants for sort of tech companies, and they provide consultation in those arenas. I know you can go in and become a psychologist to work with athletes. So if you want to work with the NBA or the NFL or some other pro teams, there's psychologists who do that. And, I provide mental health program consultation to the NBA. So there are things that you can do with your degree that really, you don't have to know all of that right now. As Heather said, chances are the field will have evolved so much by the time you're ready to graduate from the degree. I mean, things change every year. And so like, I know people who are providing consultation to some of the social media platforms. And so there's people who use their degree to work on sets of films, right? Or jury selection. So there's so many different ways that we can use our degree. And so again, just pursue what interests you, and then the jobs that are associated or affiliated with that will probably emerge, or you'll get to create it if it doesn't exist.
Thank you. It's nice to know that the options seem endless, so that's exciting to me. We're gonna move on to our next question, which is, a student said, I thought it is beneficial to apply for a doctorate program after finishing a bachelor's degree. I wonder if that is true or not.
I'm going to let my colleagues speak to this one because my degree is the MSW. So,
It's possible to apply straight out of, like right after undergrad, you can apply to doctoral programs. I don't think there's a benefit or any negative connotations either. I think it's really up to you in terms of whether you feel like you're ready, life stage, etc. So I don't think there's necessarily a specific timeline. I know people who have come right after undergrad, did it right after undergrad. I know people who have done it after changing careers in their 50s. And so it really, I think, is just pretty varied. And yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it kind of depends on what you want and what you need and what your life circumstances are, and financially, right? Because there's financial implications for one or the other. The only thing that I would say is that if you take some time between undergraduate and your graduate degree program, is you'll need to be able to speak to how that then applies to what you're pursuing. So if you took a year off to volunteer, then make sure it's around something that you can relate back to why you're pursuing this particular degree. Because I used to sit on an admissions board for graduate programs in psychology, and they would say, well, what did you do with your time? And so you just want to be able to apply even if it was like, I worked at the coffee shop, talk about how what you learned in the coffee shop and being around people, and how that is, sparked your passion and interest for wanting to be in this graduate program. So you'll just need to be able to speak to what you did in that gap between undergrad and graduate.
Thank you so much for answering. So I have another question. So it's tailored for Dr. Diaz. So I'm leaning towards psychology degree, but while doing research, I came across stigmas associated with the psych lead program, and a few resources mentioned that a psych program isn't even as much credit as a psych lead PhD program. Even though both are doctorate programs, how did you navigate the stigmatization while choosing your psych lead program?
It's a great question. I think no matter what we do and no matter where we go, there's always probably going to be some degree of stigma or people projecting whatever stereotypes and bias that they may have. And so I think part of it is I feel confident about the training and the education that I received, and I know that I can hold my own in any room. when talking about whether it's research or clinical practice. And that I made sure that the programs that I selected were going to give me that robust training so that I could hold my own when I'm in the room in those different spaces, whether it's a PsyD, PhD, or an MD. I'm in a lot of spaces with MDs as well. The thing that I would say is that I also knew pretty early on that I didn't necessarily imagine myself being a lecturer or a faculty member doing research and teaching. I will say that stigma is and continues to remain true, and that if you want to primarily do research and teaching at a lot of the Research One institutions, you will likely not become tenure track faculty with a PsyD. That doesn't mean you can't be a lecturer, doesn't mean you won't be an adjunct. That has shifted some, but that was pretty true back then and continues to be. That's not my interest. And so my interest was in doing clinical work, and but it has not held me back from being an administrator. It has not held me back from doing advocacy work. It has not held me back in terms of the system. I feel pretty confident about the training, and in many spaces, I would go in and I saw that I was better clinically trained in some situations than others. So that made me feel even better in some ways. I do think the thing that was evolving for a lot of the PsyD programs was more the stuff that Heather talks about and the social work, and what Lydia talked about from a counseling psych program is the emphasis on social justice and social advocacy and multiculturalism. That was a little bit lacking. It was a little bit more westernized and focused on sort of deficit as opposed to really looking at sort of the full picture. That has changed, I think, as psychology is trying to catch up with sort of the social work world. But I have not found this to be a detriment to me. And so I see the next question kind of bleeds into this, which is, what was the proportion of my work? My program from the very beginning, first year, I was already doing clinical practicum. And so working clinically along the course of all of the years of my program, versus some PhD programs will emphasize research for a couple of years, make sure you get the foundational theoretical basis before they throw you into sitting across from a client. And so it was pretty evenly proportioned for me.
Yes, thank you for answering those two questions. We do want to be mindful of your time because it's almost 5. So we'll try to get to these last few questions really quick. So the next question is, what are some good platforms on finding some good volunteer opportunities? What types should I focus on?
So you have a great resource with the Division of Career Pathways, and also with your professors and your peers on campus. I would definitely talk to them and ask for resources, recommendations of places you can volunteer. I personally found places by just looking up different nonprofit organizations, because they're always looking for volunteers in different areas. I would just look for their individual websites, and usually they'll have information. You can research a little bit into the type of program that they are, how long they've been around, how reputable they are, what type of training they would provide you as a volunteer. So those are all good things to look into.
Thank you so much. I'll ask the last question, and I think we can wrap up with this one. So I have noticed a lot of master's program have a list of classes for the program. Are these required to have done before applying, or do you complete them while enrolled?
So it's some programs, for most programs, there are some courses that are required. Like for me, I actually had to go to community college and take, I think it was like a specific biology class, like human biology, that I needed, that I didn't elect to take during my undergrad. So I needed to take that as a prereq for my master's program. You're just going to want to look closely at the university websites to see and delineate which ones are prerequisites and which you're going to take during the program. And then there'll even be continuing education after the program as well. There are courses, or even, we didn't even get into talking about exams, but studying that you have to do as part of your licensure process. So Hopefully that helps. I would get in contact with the school itself and look on their website for details about what is required to join their program.
Yeah, I mean, nothing really to add about that, but just as we're aware of time and I'm looking at some of the questions that were in the chat or in the Q&A, one of the things that I do want to encourage all of you is whether you're exploring, if you're exploring doctoral programs, so whether it's a PhD or a PsyD, really look at the program statistics, the graduation rates and the internship match rates, and make sure that you are applying for programs that are APA accredited, so accredited by the American Psychological Association. The field has really moved in a direction that unless you are coming from an APA accredited program, it really limits your job opportunities as well as your internship opportunities at the other end. So just look for that in there, and every program has to produce its statistics and its match rates. And so look on their websites for that information as you're exploring programs.
Yeah, thank you. So looks like it's exactly 5 right now. So I think we should start wrapping it up. I want to thank all the attendees for coming out, but also a big thank you to the panelists. Thank you so much for taking the time. I know I really enjoyed hearing all of your experiences and advice, and I know that the attendees did too. But yeah, thank you so much for coming out. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you for having us here. And if anybody has any follow-up questions, please know they're welcome to reach out to us, and we're happy to answer those questions.
Can the panelists drop their email addresses so that it's easier on the students to contact?
Yeah. The only caveat is that if you have a clinical or a personal mental health matter that you would like some support around, email is not the best way to reach us. Please call our main number. But if you have questions about programs that you're looking into, please feel free to send us an email. We'll do what we can to support you.
So thank you everyone for coming. So yeah, so it's right. It's more than 5. We'll be respectful of everyone's time, and we'll end the session here today. So if you have any more questions for anything, you can always reach out to SARC. You can email SARC too, and we can help you find the best resources that helps you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Take care.